Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. And welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And we're still in 1936. Boy, does John Ford make a lot of movies in one year. But we're going to be talking about the Plough and the Stars. But joining me is my pal Foster. Foster, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Foster's part of my group that consistently just keeps jumping in for all these John Ford films. Soon, that'll be over in, December. So not soon. Still have a whole year of John Ford to go through. Boy, did he make a lot of films. And I'm really hoping that the winner of my director's tournament has like a manageable amount of films and not doing another like year plus adventure.
Mhm.
But it's been interesting going through all these John Ford films, especially because has an interesting range of different kinds of films as we're returning back to one of his very Irish influenced films, as his father was actually an Irish immigrant. But for those who haven't tuned into this show before, we have three segments. We have our coming attractions for the weekend of last weekend of January, and then we'll be getting into our feature film as well as some recommendations. But this last weekend for January 26th, there's not a whole lot coming out. There's not a big releases or anything like that. Seems like a couple of small indie films and also, a Snoop Dogg football movie or whatever that's coming out on Amazon Prime. But Foster, what are you most excited about?
I wouldn't say excited, but the one that catches my interest from this lineup is Miller's Girl with Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman. It seems like he's her teacher, and perhaps there's a little bit of a something something going on between them. And I don't know. I really know nothing about this movie, but I like both of those two people. And yeah, who knows?
That is also the only reason why this movie caught my attention is because it has Jenna Ortega and Martin Freeman in it.
Hmm.
So it'll be interesting. I heard this film popping up, but for some reason, like I use first showing for keeping track of what's coming out or not. They didn't even have this on the release calendar until like 2 weeks ago. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because I've known about the film longer than that. But it'll be interesting to see how those two very talented actors play off of each other. And similarly, my pick is something mostly based off of who's in it. Sometimes I think about Dying, which one seems like an interesting title. And was like, what's this about? And also starring Daisy Ridley, which I'm looking forward to seeing her do more things than just being, Ray, which she will be again for $12.5 million. As I was hearing her discuss how she had breakfast with Kathleen Kennedy, and she's like, hey, you want to come back? But also the poster for this looks very intriguing. Has an interesting font. It looks kind of like mysterious and dreamy, and just has, a woman laying there in what looks like some creepy woods. And I'm like, well, that looks compelling enough. And that tells you a lot about what this weekend has in store. Because the interesting thing is, this is the last weekends of like January and the beginning of February is interesting because it's still like the very height of playoff football. And they especially try to avoid dropping big movies when, big football games are happening since so many people are at home. So it'll be interesting to see if any of these little films pop up or if Mean Girls and Wonka keep steamrolling through everything. As it
Yeah.
appears, they probably will, to be honest. But those are coming attractions. And our feature film for this week is The Plough and the Stars. So this film, which is only like, I don't know, it was less than like an hour and 10 minutes when I watched this on the Criterion channel. So shameless plug, this is on the Criterion channel. To get a little background, this is obviously directed by John Ford. Why else would we be talking about it? It's from 1936. It's starring Barbara Stanwyck, who was like the big star that really caught my eye looking at this. This is based off of a play by Sean O'Casey, very Irish. Ford wanted to cast from the actual Abbey Theater performance of this and got a lot of pushback from the studio who didn't think there was enough stars. Spencer Tracy was originally lined up to be in this film and actually pulled out of the film and then went on to make a bunch of really successful films in a row for his studio because they were going to borrow him for this. Ford and Stanwyck actually had a lot of tension on set because Stanwyck didn't think that this role of hers was particularly interesting or had a lot to it, and made an off comment about that, and apparently pissed off John Ford. So he was not happy about it. You have actor Arthur Shields, who actually partaken in the real Easter Rising when he was a child. So that's very interesting and authentic there. When they were translating this, they cut out a lot of the comedic elements, which then I watched the film and I'm like, I feel like there's still some comedic elements in this film, and I'm like, how much did they cut out? Like, how funny was this movie supposed to be? And then what was interesting, which also caused a lot of tension between John Ford and Barbara Stanwyck, was he did not want any of the actors to be wearing makeup while filming because he wanted them to look natural and authentic. So apparently she was not happy about that. And Ford hated the studio for cutting a lot of the political elements out of this film, which is very interesting because he keeps making these Irish films and they keep seem to be like the studio's neutering a lot of the big political issues, like the one of his previous films, The Informer. They wouldn't let him really display the fact that like it was about the IRA. They're just like, oh, these are just random Irish criminals, and it's just like, but are they? And this film apparently was they were forced him to cut a lot of those kinds of elements out. But Foster, what are your general thoughts on the film?
Yeah, I thought this was fine for me. It didn't really like move me one way or the other. Sorry. But I think Barbara Stanwyck, I think, is probably my favorite thing about the movie. I just think she's very good, and like it makes sense that she would become huge, like just
Mhm.
within a couple years. I mean, I feel like this was like midway through her rise, but before she kind of blew up. Um, I think I don't know, it just felt a little too straightforward to me maybe. And I also read some of the stuff you read about the removing of the humor.
Mhm.
What I gather from the play is it seems like it was more like satirical. Like
Mhm.
it seems like the author I was just looking at the Wikipedia page for the movie, and there was a review of the movie that said that the author of the play was maybe not as pro rebellion as you might assume from the movie, and that it approached the story as in like, some people really just wanted to join the rebellion because there was like drinking and you could like escape from your, like normal humdrum of life, and it
Yeah.
maybe wasn't as noble a cause as you might assume from the movie. And then when I had that in my head, I was like, okay, you know what? That would have been way more interesting to see. And so I think that maybe kind of soured me on the movie just a little bit. I don't think there's anything bad about it really at all. It's just I don't know. I just kind of watched it, and it was what it was. It's probably my least favorite of the ones I've watched for this show so far. Yeah.
Yeah, this one I thought was which it was very interesting because I just watched his first last week, his first 2 hour plus film, which was Mary of Scotland. And it felt it. Like it felt 2 hours and 6 minutes. And then this film's under an hour and 10 minutes, and I was a little like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm wondering how long the actual cut of this movie was before the studio got a hold of it and like chopped it down and leaned it out. I
Hmm.
still thought this was pretty effective for me and for what this particular film was going for. Obviously, it definitely seems like there was something a lot more interesting going on that could have made this film a lot more interesting. It would have been interesting to see a more satirical take on this situation and also something a little bit more biting and complex when it came to this idea. Because realistically, what this film is an hour, 7 minutes or so of the struggle between a married couple and their priorities in their relationship and the systematic like beating down of a rebellion. And it doesn't do a whole lot of extra there. There are a couple of like little elements that are thrown in there for like comedic purposes. There's this running gag with this guy who keeps like going outside hearing loud noises and then desperately running back to his front door. And I'm just like, it felt very like old school, like, haha, comedy. That's silly. And it's just like, did that belong in a movie like this? there's definitely some moments where it feels very like staged, where it's like you have these two women in like a bar, and they wind up having a very specific conversation with each other and perspective about the rebellion. Which also, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure one of them was the actress that keeps popping up in all the Universal horror films
Yeah,
as
yeah.
a comic relief character. I'm just like, well, that's interesting. Didn't expect to see her in this. But yeah, Barbara Stanwyck is easily the best part of this movie. Every time she has, like, she's given, what's interesting is I like obviously I don't know how she was feeling specifically about this film. I'm not her, but like there's some meaty moments that she gets to have, and she really makes the most of them. Like every time there's like a fight, sure, the actor who plays Jack, I think he does a fine job. But like she's like really digging in emotionally into this performance and delivering something special. And it felt like it was special. And I think John Ford knew to keep cutting to these like intimate close-ups of her and capturing those very emotional moments. And then I started to like the film more as it progressed, and I think mostly it was because the technical elements of it started really coming into play because they started having like stunts and special effects and action and stuff like that. And some big sets like on top of rooftops and all these different kinds of things. I feel like those were the elements of this film that started to really engage me just from like an experiential part of it. And all the way up to like that one of the final like just shots of the flag like floating
Mhm.
off into the wind. I'm like, there's some really interesting and impactful imagery. I felt like that came into play in the film. But like it is very lean, very straightforward, and also leaves you kind of thinking like maybe there was more to this film originally, and then studio did its thing and then plopped down an hour and 7 minute film.
Yeah. I think maybe I also liked the Barbara Stanwyck stuff when she gets time to kind of show off. I think that was probably my favorite part of the movie was just like um yes, he's going off to join the Irish citizen army, and I but on the other hand she is, left at home to kind of deal with that and deal with that loneliness. Like she says, like women are born to love just as men are born to fight, or something like that. I feel like that idea was really interesting, and I think it would have hit home for me more if she were even more of a protagonist than she is in this movie, because I felt like there was so much time spaced out between Barbara Stanwyck, Preston Foster, and then the
Yeah.
like people on the ground like Fluther, which is a great name. Like all of those people as well. And I felt like it was hard for me to kind of zero in my focus and care on any particular storyline for that reason. Um, I will say the moment that I thought was like most affecting, she has some line when they're like out searching for her husband, and she says something about how they're cowards, and then someone else pushes back against that. She's like, no, they're all cowards. I wrote it down. All afraid to say they're afraid. That's why they keep on fighting. Fools, do you think they want to die? And I feel like that like hit home, and I was like, I want more of that in this movie,
Yep.
where it like really analyzes the like motivations for joining this rebellion too. Like I don't know, I kind of wanted more of a perspective. Like I want, not that I wanted the movie to tell me how to feel, but a little bit. I wanted to know like
Mhm.
what exactly am I supposed to be feeling here in this moment for these characters. Um, One funny moment, since you mentioned there are still some funny things, this one took me out because it's just out of nowhere and they could have easily cut it. I wonder if you know where I'm going with this, but it's Easter and Jack is walking down the street and like starts playing around with the football or something that the kids are playing
Yeah.
with. And then the police officer comes and says, "Come on, it's Easter Sunday. Be decent. You're worse than the children." And then the police officer just punts the football once Jack walks away.
It's just like, and that was the thing. I'm like, so I guess they took out all the biting satire humor of it and then left in
Yeah.
all the silly things. And I'm just like,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, maybe you should have took out the different humor that you left in
Yeah.
this film. Because like that kind of stuff just didn't do anything for me watching
Hmm.
the film. And I'm just like, and that one gag just kept going. I kept going back to that same guy, like obnoxiously running back to his door. I'm just like, my God, we get it. Let it go.
Yep.
But I do feel like, yeah, Barbara Stanwyck, whenever she swooped in, had something big to say, very impassioned, and it just looked. This
Hmm.
is a very odd connection, but it's something that is at least relatively fresh in my mind. It kind of reminded me of Penelope Cruz in the Ferrari film, where it's just
Okay.
like
Sure.
wherever she pops in, she just brings this energy to this film. Like, where the hell's the rest of you with
Yeah.
the rest of this film? And this is actually an odd comparison. I actually got a lot more excited and interested in that movie as that went on because it actually got into the action of it all. Because
Hmm.
like, especially towards the first half of this film, just like whenever Barbara Stanwyck wasn't on screen, there just was like they're just chatting. They're
Hmm.
just having a conversation and about like very specific things related to what's going on. It's just I felt like she was on a whole different kind of level in terms of what she was bringing to the table here. And John Ford's very lucky that he had her in this film, despite the fact that he was pissed off at her.
Hmm.
So, you know, those are always the interesting things because, of course, she did become a giant star after this, and
Hmm.
she should because she definitely overshadowed so much of this film and in a good way. But I guess, Foster, do you have any other thoughts?
Just one quick last one. Really more so in like the first 15 minutes, but the music was pretty great. It wasn't used as
Yep,
much throughout, but yeah, it also really sounded like Home for the Holidays, the theme. I just kept thinking about it. It was like duh, 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 and it took like the same theme as Home from for the Holidays, but with just like one different note, and it just threw me off. But yeah, I thought it was really nice in the opening credits, especially.
that's interesting because I thought it was really good music and also felt oddly familiar. I couldn't put on like I feel like I've almost heard this music
Yeah.
before, and I guess there it is. I'm just like, so that's one thing. A couple of his recent films, he definitely seems to find some good composers to bring some
Hmm.
strong music. Because, like, I'm pretty sure some of his films even just won Oscars for its score and not much else. But, this is a director who won literally four Oscars for Best Director. So John Ford certainly has some big winners and also some not great ones. When you direct, like, I think he has 147 actual directing credits.
Hmm.
So not everything's going to be a winner.
Yeah.
But those are our thoughts on the Plow and the Stars. But Foster, what would you like to recommend to people?
Oh, I'm gonna recommend. So I was catching up on some 2023 movies that I had missed from throughout the year, and I think my favorite or one of my favorites that I caught up on was Scrapper. This is directed by Charlotte Reagan. I think it's her first movie. Yeah, I'm looking. She has a lot of shorts, but this is her first feature. It looks like it's with Harris Dickinson, who's from like Triangle of Sadness, and is not George McKay, as I keep wanting to think he is, because I in my head they're in the same category of person. And there's a young kid played by Lola Campbell. She's like a young 10 to 12-year-old girl. She is so good in this. This is her first movie, I have to assume. Yeah, it's her first movie. And she kind of reconnects with her dad, who's pretty young, who's like in his 20s, or maybe 30. Um, and it's funny. It's got this like kind of snarky British sense of humor that I really like.
Mhm.
It's like a family drama, and it's short. It's 84 minutes. So if
Yeah.
that doesn't sell you, but yeah, this is pretty moving because her dad is maybe not the best dad on paper, but he's able to provide her what she needs emotionally, that she's missing now that, but right before the movie, her mom died. So that's why her dad has come back into the picture. And it's kind of interesting, and I think a pretty sweet movie, like about the value of being a good parent, really. Because yeah, like I said, like if you look at the things they do together, they steal and they like are
Mhm.
like trying to take people's bikes and stuff. Like he's not a great influence in that sense, but like she's gonna grow up loved, which I think
Yeah.
counts for something. So it's pretty neat movie. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, I love that one. I remember when I got a screener for that, like, I don't even know. It was months ago. And it's definitely one of my favorite, small budget kind of dramas that came out last year.
Mhm.
It like the dynamic between the two of them is so great. And I must really enjoy like British like wit about it because I just had such a blast with the humor in the film, and there's a lot of heart to it. So I would second that, and you should definitely go check that out. It's definitely one of those nice little hidden gems from 2023 as we're gearing up for 2024 a couple weeks in now. So I have a couple of recommendations. So my new film that I wanted to recommend is Mars Express. This is debuting this week actually at the Animation First Film Festival. It is a French film festival that focuses on animation. And this film is set in like 23rd century. It's a murder mystery, and the two investigators are a human and an android, and it really digs deep into, artificial intelligence and what makes us human, those kinds of themes. You could definitely tell that it was highly influenced by like Akira and like Ghost in the Shell kind of late 80s, early 90s action sci-fi anime, but also definitely has some influences from like Brian De Palma and Paul Verhoeven in it as well. And it's a strikingly animated film. And it's also like 85 minutes. So it's nice and lean, but also really cool. And has some really awesome visuals and stuff like that. There's probably even like little bits of like Tron in it a bit with some of its design. It's a really cool film, and I have no idea when this is going to get like an actual US release, but when it does, you should definitely check it out. What's I got a whole like set of films from the Animation First Film Festival. The one that I didn't get was Robot Dreams, and I'm like, I've been wanting to see that film for a while. I know a couple people who saw it, and I'm just like, lucky. And it looks really awesome. So, one film that I checked off my watch list, thanks to Heath, our buddy, friend of the show, is The Ring, because he chose that as he's going to be the 90th guest and the 90th episode guest on Road in the Wasteland, and we'll be talking
Uh,
about The Ring then. So you can hear all of my long lot of thoughts about this film, but still scared the crap out of me. So there you go. Um, I've seen so much imagery from this film, and of course, I saw Scary Movie 3 so many times, and I'm just like, I obviously know a lot of the beats to this. But it was really effective. And when I get the nerve, I'll watch Rengu as well. But like, this is the kind of film that's like, Gore Verbinski really has a very specific eye, and I wasn't the biggest fan of The Cure for Wellness, but I thought it looked really cool and it definitely made an atmosphere. And you definitely feel that here. And this is such an interesting idea, too. Obviously, they didn't come up with it, it's a remake, but it's definitely something that was worth checking out finally, because I wasn't always somebody who would watch horror films because I'm a big baby, but at least I got around to it. Thanks, Heath. So. I messaged him and Rowan while watching. I'm like, thanks so much. Scared the shit out of me. So there you go. Um, Foster, are you a fan of The Ring?
I like it. I mean, I saw it once like 5 years ago. It's not one I think about a ton, but I should probably rewatch it. I do like Gore Verbinski a lot, and I am one of the 10 people who really likes A Cure for Wellness. I think
There you go.
like in large part because it just looks so good.
It certainly does look so good, and it definitely had an atmosphere about it. I don't know. There's not a lot of films that I'm a big fan of Dane DeHaan in. I feel like he has very specific avenue for his talents,
Yeah,
and some of his choices have not been that. And I kind of felt like the story went a little off the rails towards the end. I'm like, what the hell's going
it
on?
does. Yeah, yeah.
But, it's still a very interesting and disturbing film. And that trailer, those trailers got me. That got me so excited for that film. And the last thing, one of my films that I rewatched, part of a Nick Cage movie marathon, is Con Air. This movie is ridiculous amount of fun. This is so 90s Jerry Bruckheimer action movie, and has such a fun cast of criminals in it, with like Nick Cage and his flowing hair in the wind, and it's just like his southern accent's so funny. But you have the likes of John Malkovich as Cyrus the Virus, Ving Rhames, Steve Buscemi. It's just such a great cast of characters and has some thrilling moments, and just the banter between all these crazy characters is so much fun. If you love 90s action movies and you haven't seen Con Air, what are you doing? You should go check it out. Also, rewatch Face Off. But that is a wrap here on Welcome to the Wasteland. Foster, thank you so much for coming on and chatting yet another John Ford film with me.
Of course, thanks again.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.